townspeople threw rocks at our school and at our bus. And so the teachers went on strike. And it made national headlines. It was 1974. I was one of those kids that was on the bus that got stoned. And so those were the seeds that were planted in me as a young person when I went on to do this work with education. And that's kind of nearest I can figure why I do what I do. Instead of throwing stones now, I challenge groups of people to work together to spin stone eggs cooperatively. Each of us comes from an egg. Our planet is an oblate sphere. It's a spinning egg-shaped object. Of course, for years they thought the planet was flat, and then they decided that it was round. But 25 years ago, they launched the Hubble telescope into outer space. Some believe it's the most important scientific instrument ever created. And not only did they confirm what they believed was true, that the planet was egg-shaped, they were able to train the Hubble telescope out at an area towards the pole star. And they were fascinated with what they saw, which was an infinite number of galaxies. And so one of my real theories about science and human nature is that, well, 90% of all communication is nonverbal, which is kind of an interesting story in and of itself. So if you're trying to teach communication and cooperation, what you really need to do is eliminate the language barrier. Let's see, in 1997, the Bible was translated into 2,297 different languages, almost 2,300 different languages. So we know that if you take an egg game into inner city Boston, Cambridge schools, and you go to a third and a fourth grade classroom, there are 5 primary languages in that classroom. And as a result, they find that it's very difficult to teach children what they need to teach them because there's a communications breakdown in the classroom on a regular basis. So my first classroom was an inner city, 3rd and 4th grade combined, and the teacher Bernadette there, she was amazed at how when she reached this communications breakdown, if she stopped and took an egg game break, it would totally change the focus from chaos to cooperation. And this was the feedback that she gave me. And that was 1995 when I started out. And I was not as interested in education at that time. I was more interested in succeeding with a product in the marketplace. So I went to a toy fair, which is the world's largest toy show. I did that 3 years in a row and established 35 different vendors around the nation, none of which really used or sold my product effectively. And from that point on, I started visiting with educators at teacher conferences. It was suggested to me by a local couple here in Flathead, the welders, Sally and Terry. They run the Montessori school, that I visit with their other colleagues in San Diego at their Montessori conference, which was at the time an annual event. And so I went down, and in the first appearance, I learned that Maria Montessori was a wonderful educator. I hadn't really learned that much about her, but her principles of hands-on education and getting kids involved and supporting the individual are very pioneering in education, especially in successful, if you're looking for successful results with education. She was in inner city Italy, Rome, in the times of Benito Mussolini. And her ghetto schools were graduating doctors and successful people. And Benito picked up on this and wanted her to nationalize the Italian education system. But his one requirement was that she require a uniform for every student. And she flat out told him that that's not how children learn. And she refused the job. And so from that point on, now there are 6,000 Montessori schools worldwide. 500 of those schools use my curriculum. There are 14 different nations that use the egg game now. People don't need to speak the same language to play this game. And it's kind of neat because it started in, those seeds that were the chaos of education that was, born in me as a young person. Now they've done an amazing study on this. In 2007, they went back to the Boston public schools and they looked at where things have gone since then. and it's only gone downhill. And they found that 14% of the students are now white. A lot of the affluent children in the Boston City departments go to private schools, and so there's this downward spiral of culturally rich settings in Boston public schools. So it's very interesting, because what they need and what they learned in this 2007 study was they need things that are culturally resonant. And hands-on education is where we're losing students, where there's not enough hands-on education, and students are becoming disenfranchised, usually by 5th grade, which is very interesting to me, because that's exactly where I pulled away from education when I was a youth. In 5th grade, it was just things got too difficult, I got too distracted, and their study was absolutely on target for me. Whether it was, not enough culturally resonant activities or not a culturally rich enough environment, these are the things that inspire children to learn. So anyway, after the first school and then the influx of Montessori schools that were supporting my project, I really committed to working with educators. So again, for the past 15 years now, since I started this, I've been attending as many teacher conferences as I can. I've done a lot of them here in the state of Montana. I've gone regionally over to Portland and worked with Northwest educators in San Juan Islands and all around Seattle. There are a lot of children's museums that picked up on my game. So the Seattle Children's Museum and the Indianapolis Children's Museum use it. The Missoula Children's Museum used to love it. There's a lot of people that appreciate it. But science teachers or the next real stepping stone for me, because in order to succeed in education, you really have to, there's curriculum requirements now that are very significant. And so there are a lot of hands-on activities that people use to do team building that involve no props at all. We've all been to workshops where we get in a circle and sit on each other's knees, and all these activities are wonderful. But if you're going to be teaching science, generally you have to have some hard physics behind you. And so I made an outreach to work with NSTA, the National Science Teachers of America, and I went to a couple of their national conferences, which was really a smart thing for me to do, because it got me connected with science educators who were kind of really in education. If we're not graduating enough engineers today, we're falling behind in education. So when you look at these inner city schools and the problems that they're having educating people, you look to science as, well, where and how are they testing? How are the kids testing it? So with math and science and everything being quantifiable, it can be your strongest or your weakest link. So if you have the funding and you have the support interest for science and math, you get a lot of strength out of that. But schools that they don't have the audience, they have these language issues, there's a need. Basically what I'm trying to say is there is a big need for these hands-on methods. And so I was well received in not only the Montessori community, but then the science community. So we set up another 500 science classrooms, the result of NSTA, National Science Teachers of America. And 2 years ago, one of them just totally flabbergasted me and ordered 900 egg games. The Edison schools, they are, the Thomas Edison Foundation, they teach summer science camp. That's pretty allotted in the industry. It's called Newton Learning, and what they do is they try to get kids' hands on Newton's laws, and so they use the egg game, and we'll get to do a little bit of that. But the egg game really covers a lot of key basics in physics: friction, gravity, potential energy, kinetic energy, centripetal and centrifugal forces. So, and nowadays there are a lot of STEM requirements and a lot of opportunities for kids to check out a lab of the egg game in their after-school program and learn about this. So it's kind of, well, the San Bernardino City Schools, they were another big supporter of the egg game. They put 300 egg games into their after-school programs 5 years ago. And they, their challenge there is to keep kids out of harm's way from 4 to 7 p.m. And in San Bernardino, you're 25, 30 miles from the Mexican border, or a little bit further. It's actually a little further. It's like 50 down there. But still, there's a lot of language issues in San Bernardino and Los Angeles. And so special ed, another avenue for me was with the learning of the brain people at Harvard University. They have an annual gathering of psychologists and occupational therapists. And I attended that with the egg game 5 years ago. And I felt like it was an interesting place to go, and they were very interested in the egg game. I was fortunate. I had some special ed success stories. One classroom in Lagunitas, California, kept an egg spinning for 4 hours. So a group of 6 children with learning disabilities, whether they were autistic or ADD, ADHD, I am not fully aware of that, what their specific challenges were. But bottom line is, with special ed classroom, they kept this egg spinning for 4 hours, establishing a record for perpetuating the motion of a spinning object with a flat surface. So if you were to take the average special ed classroom in Boston, Mass., what you find with kids that are autistic is that oftentimes they're kind of cornered away to do word games and crossword puzzles all day long. That's pretty much the activity of choice. And so theoretically, if you were to take these children and get them working together with something that's very simple, but that has extended challenges. I mean, yes, a group of people can keep an egg spinning for 4 hours, but a lot of people don't have 4 hours. So if you get 4 people together and 4 eggs spinning, that'll significantly reduce the amount of time that the group's able to do this. But again, the challenge here is with special ed situations, how do you get children learning about even things that are simple like communication and cooperation? So the media, having the media to do that with the egg game was, and providing that media has become my modus operandi. So I feel fortunate because, again, in this challenging economy, each of us really needs to have a creative niche. And so the data is in. If you're trained as an accountant, chances are there's somebody in Bangalore will do it for a third the cost of what it takes. So each of us needs to determine, well, what is this contribution that we're going to make? And we're fortunate here in America because we have a history of establishing creative niches. That's sort of one of our strengths. In our lack of education, we're able to, and again, we're an agrarian society. And we were evolved out of the antithesis of education here in America. I mean, although we have a lot of education, we're a society that was built on farming and family. And so now that we're non-competitive in the world scene with education, in other words, India is graduating 150,000 engineers a year to our 50,000. We have to find other things and other ways to stimulate and to recover our economy and our educational systems. And so we are, and the Secretary of Education is very interested in how we're going to be competitive in the next 25 years. And so, and our economics people are very concerned as to how we're going to recover our economy. But I believe that the two are inseparable, and that we need to somehow bridge these gaps in education. and the middle class. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get a healthy middle class of people to rise again, and that's all about inner city education. Because when you have these situations with a lot of inner city schools that are there are these challenges in these schools, the kids are not gaining an education. So we need to have these cultural competencies, and we need to get these people working together. So that's kind of what how I'm feeling that, or my niche. That's why there is a creative niche for the egg game. This is kind of what I've learned over the course of the past 15 years. And so yes, we have lots of specialty schools, a lot of after-school programs, a lot of science classrooms, and then a lot of general educators all around the world using the game now. And I'm thrilled with it because it's really, it satisfies my need for making a contribution. So let me check my notes real quick and see if there's other things I wanted to talk about. Last week I was at the Swan River School, and the kindergartners came through, and the first graders came through, and the second and third and fourth and fifth graders came through. And each different level has a different level of ability, as do each of us. And the goal is to honor everybody's level of ability, when in truth there are no better or worses. Each of us is a thing in itself. And our society is really based on that good, better, best principle. And so when you start educating yourself, you realize that education is about learning how to learn. It's also about learning how to keep learning. And so open-mindedness, equality, all of these principles are fundamental to education and to educate people. So the smartest people are the people with the most open mind. It's not always the case. There's always exceptions. But in truth, intelligence is based on not necessarily judging any situation. It's looking at a situation, in anthropology they call it sui genera, without gender. And it's an interesting term because a lot of the stereotyping that we see in schools, that and a lot of these bullying issues, which is a hot issue right now in education. What you want to establish is a level playing field, and then when you have these good, better, best situations, you just don't have that level playing field. So that's why the importance of the roundtable discussion. And we've all, in communications theory, it's much more effective to have a round table for a board meeting than it is to have a square table, because what happens is there's polarization and head of a table, or and more power. And so when you get a round table, you get everybody on an even keel or an equal footing. And so that's kind of one of the neat challenges, is just getting people to think out of the box. Now, how do you win this game? Well, this game has no winner or loser. When I first started working with the toy and game industry, people thought the egg game was going to be the next Frisbee. A lot of people saw it. Hasbro, Wham-O, Mattel, the three largest toy manufacturers, their toy designers found me, took my product, wanted to make something of it, but their end result was that they passed on the egg game because it was non-competitive. If there's no winner or a loser, technically it's not a game, it's an activity. So like the hacky sack, for example, which was born out of competition. In Thailand, they actually play a competitive version of the footbag with a net. But here in America, we've kind of changed things around, branded it the hacky sack, and it's a cooperative game. So the greatest thing about the egg game is it's non-traditional, but it's also science-based. So when I go into the classroom, and I usually do it in a gym class, and the first thing I do is raise earth awareness for children. 75% of the children in today's elementary schools have no idea which direction the planet spins. And I venture to guess one or more of us here doesn't know that the planet spins in the counterclockwise direction. Well, not only does our planet spin in the counterclockwise direction, but 7 out of 9 of the planets in our solar system follow suit. So fundamentally there's a lot of this counterclockwise energy, and we're going to explore that with the egg game. It's pretty exciting because you can actually feel the Earth's magnetic field. But so what I like to do to start with is to get the children really grounded. The Native Americans, they often honor the 4 directions at the beginning of a sweat lodge. And why is that important? Well, it's really orientation, and we want to be grounded. Each of us wants to know, where does the sun rise and where does it set? Well, what does that mean? Why are there 365 days in the year, I ask my students, when there's only 360 degrees in a circle? And the sun, of course, stays in one place, but the planet revolves around the sun. Well, that's not a perfect circle. It's an oval, right? There's extra points in an oval. So it's this knowledge may sound very basic, but it's very empowering for young people to feel that they understand these concepts. And then when they start playing with it, and they get their hands on a spinning egg that's, and we start swinging our arms with the board and realize that it's quite easier to keep the egg spinning in the counterclockwise direction than the clockwise direction. They've found fire for the first time. I mean, this is magnetism, and these are all empowering concepts. And also I challenge them. We talk about Earth's history a little bit as well. How old is the planet? Does anybody have any idea? Out of there's 7 of us in here. How old is the planet?
2,000 years.
2,000 years. There's a guess. Anybody else have an educated guess? 20 billion. Closer. The planet is 4.56 billion years old, as far as we know. Not only is it 4.56 billion years old, there's at least that many people on the planet today. So, and you think about that just for a little bit, and populations and all this stuff. It's a fascinating amount of time. It's really a lot of time. I'm going to pass out an egg. I want each of you to have one of these eggs in your hands here so you can feel what's going on. If you look inside the egg, you'll see there's little bits of fossil. What you see contained within the egg, these eggs are fossiliferous limestone. Limestone is the lithification of sea creatures. They live and they die. When they die, they sink to the bottom of the ocean. There's millions of pounds of water on top of them that each weigh, 8.2 pounds per gallon of water or something. Millions of gallons of water over millions of years compresses the mud of the living and dying sea creatures into blocks of rock. What you see contained within the egg, if your egg doesn't have a huge fossil in it, some of these up here do, and they're snails and clams. They're about 30 million years old. There's a snail shell there. They've got some fossil in there. There's one. 30 million years old. I still have folks on the street that come up to me when I'm giving egg game demonstrations, and they say, well, how can these eggs be 30 million years old? The planet's only 6,000 years old. To me, that's amazing, because it's just yet another opportunity to do a little bit of education, and I have a very specific answer. Usually what I say to those people is, if you take a look at the amount or the number of different breeds of dogs that have evolved from Canis lupus, it would take at least 40,000 years to domesticate that many different breeds of dogs. So you figure out whether it's God or dog. I think it's probably both. And then I just leave it at that. Sometimes it's a heated discussion. It gets a little deeper than that. But, if you don't have a sense of humor about this, no one gets out alive. And so communication is about, receiving people's information and accepting it to a certain degree. But education is about further enrichment. And so getting fossils into the hands of young kids that are really challenged and curious about, how old is the planet? What are we doing here? What's going on? All of these physical principles, and so quantifying that for them, I believe, is a very important part of what I'm doing. I challenge people to consider for a moment the Bohr theory of the atom. Of course, we've all seen it. An atom has a nucleus. It has electrons revolving around this nucleus. Each of these electrons has valence charge, which is magnetism, basically, electrical energy. Think of our model of the solar system. We have a sun, which is a nuclear reaction. We have planets revolving around this nucleus. Each of our planets has a moon, or each of the planets in our solar system, or some of them have several, which is symbolic of the gravitational pull or the valence charge. And so when I raise awareness to science, I like to bring up the higher power, like tens, hundreds, and thousands. And so our little atom here, our sun and our electrons in our solar system, there are lots of these in our galaxy, lots of solar systems, lots of atoms combined to form molecules, chemicals in a larger picture. So we have this tens, hundreds, and thousands, like we have atoms in our hand. Our sun is very possibly a nucleus, and our planet's electrons. And then if you, again, think back to the Hubble telescope and the focusing telescope on the North Star, well, what do you see is an infinite number of galaxies. So once again, gaining familiarity with this higher power, not that it's a Alcoholics Anonymous term, that it's more of a mathematical equation, is kind of one of the things that I really believe is fundamental to education. So if you understand that much of our lure of religion over the course of the past 24,000 years, there's been about 24 major world religions, and they all have approximately the same story. Divine birth. It's fascinating, and it's a great study, because the history of religion is basically based upon the sun and the sun's journey throughout the course of the year, and it's an offshoot of the old pagan religions. But there's nothing that's destroyed more human beings than organized religion, probably over the course of the history of mankind. So we have a very big challenge ahead of us, which is, again, we're integrating ideas. Not only are we integrating skin colors, but we're integrating peoples and cultures. And so when people ask me, well, what are you doing? Well, how do you do that in the Flathead here? And truth is, there's more than meets the eye here. Even in the Flathead, we have lots of different cultural orientations. We have Native Americans, hippies, tree huggers, loggers. We have a lot of Jesus freaks, white supremacists, rednecks. All these people here in the Flathead Valley are challenged, not so much here in this room, but in schools we see children the product of these stereotypes, and they are not oftentimes do they have media which kind of levels the playing field. So again, the niche of the egg game is all about those kind of working with those differences, getting those differences out in the open, and learning how to communicate, cooperate beyond that. And really, I believe that science is truly the answer to that. It's an understanding of the Earth's history, the prehistory, the future, the microcosm, the macrocosm. One of my great supporters, Andy Looney, not to be confused with Andy Rooney. Andy Looney was an interesting guy. He worked for NASA for years. He's a computer specialist, but he started a game company, and he was the first person to call the egg game a microcosmic experience. And I thought about that for a while, because that was really my fundamental theory, is that each of us comes from an egg. In fact, most life that we know originates from an egg. Fish, reptiles, plants have seeds. Seeds are egg-shaped. Mushrooms have spores. Spores are egg-shaped. I mean, there's all of this egg. The primary shape of life. Each of us comes from an egg. Our planet is a spinning egg-shaped object. So when you get a group of 5 people playing the egg game, you really have this microcosm, and it's actual reality in a virtual world. The virtual world being this little egg. So, and actual reality, our children these days are really inundated with the battery-operated war game. I mean, never before has our children had more of an opportunity to sit there and space out on their battery-operated war games. It's never been more portable and more available. And we noticed, we have a 6-year-old son who, after 45 minutes or an hour of playing his iPod or his DS, he's disagreeable. He doesn't want to communicate. He doesn't want to cooperate. All he wants to do is play with his DS. Well, now it's time for dinner. I'm not hungry. It's all this stuff that happens. And so we have to be cautious with how we recreate and how we allow our children to recreate, because, I'm as guilty as the next parent. I let my kids use the video game. I think it's important for them to have a digital awareness of how to use a computer. If it's video games that gets them exploring the internet, well, then to me that's a great thing, because look at research has never been more available to us with the internet today. We teach ourselves just about anything, and so wonderful resource. But I just don't want my kids playing battery-operated war games. And there are a lot of parents that feel the same way that we do about that. And so, but how do you've got to present healthy alternatives. And so that's kind of what the egg game. Another little bit of that is part of the egg game's niche.